Hey, it's Jordan here in Flint. I'm at Totem Books, which is actually part of this story. So we're here in Flint because we just broke a major story about the state of Michigan, the environmental agency in particular, flushing before collecting lead samples. In English, what that means, they basically ran residents' water before actually taking the lead sample. And when you allow the water run, even for 30 seconds to a minute before you take the lead sample, that flushes huge quantities of lead, copper, and other heavy metals out, which would then allow you to get a lower reading. It's called flushing. It's illegal. The EPA actually mandates that water has to be stagnant for at least 6 hours before you take a water sample checking for lead. In addition to the water having to be totally stagnant, you're supposed to take the sample as a first draw, meaning put the water bottle, turn the tap on, put the bottle in right away. We were actually here in this bookstore, I think in June, and I was telling you, I was following up on a previous story, and I was telling you that one of the residents here, his name's Bernard, 64-year-old Korean War vet. His water in 2016, they found 11,886 parts per billion of lead. The EPA's allowable limit is 15. 11,886, a little bit higher. So when I was talking to Bernard, he just kind of casually said to me, "Oh yeah, the officials ran the water I think he said 30 seconds to a minute, and then took the sample." I didn't know that that was a thing. I didn't know that that even mattered because I'm not a scientist or anything like that. But luckily, or unfortunately for you, Melissa, you're a Flint resident. You've been basically the leading activist on the ground here. You know exactly how they're supposed to test and not test. So when I found out about Bernard, you basically, in a few expletives, told me that that is a problem.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I stopped, dropped everything, stared at you, and I said, "Oh, blank, they're flushing." And the reason that's so important is like you said, it alters the lead levels. In 2015, we had found out that there are some gray areas in the lead and copper rule. So it doesn't.
The lead and copper rule is the main EPA regulation, and all of the state agencies, Michigan Environmental Quality, any state which has its own. Every state has its own environmental agency. They have to follow the federal rule for lead and copper rule.
Right. They have to do the federal level, or they can do better, but never worse. So it's standard testing. And there are some gray areas because lead and copper rule is severely outdated. It becomes a political issue, and nobody can get off their rear ends to actually change it, although we did make changes here in the state of Michigan, but pushed by residents, especially from Flint. So we know how you're supposed to test. In 2015, we took it to court to stop something called pre-flushing, which what that is when they tell residents to run the water before they go to bed at night, and then let the water sit for 6 to 8 hours, and then collect the sample first draw immediately first thing in the morning. So pre-flushing also lowers it. However, what never crossed our mind is that, yes, okay, so we had to fight them to get rid of the gray area things like using smallmouth bottles. It doesn't explicitly say don't do these things, but it's frowned upon because it can artificially lower lead levels. However, flushing, it straight out says the water has to sit stagnant. You have to do the first draw immediately after 6 to 8 hours minimum stagnation time, meaning it's just sat in the pipes, because you're supposed to find, once again, the worst case scenario. So especially homes with lead pipes or copper lines with lead solder or galvanized steel lines, the highest risk homes need to be identified and tested properly. However, if you run the water for any amount of time before you put that bottle under there, it is no longer stagnant water, it's not first draw water, it is not a proper lead and copper rule test. So when Bernard had said that, and you told me, I just sat there in shock. I'm like, wow, they're not doing the gray area things we busted them for in 2015. They're straight out violating it and letting the water run to lower these numbers. I mean, we always talk about how all the agencies, the government, they want to sweep Flint under the rug, everybody's tired of it. It's day 1,653 today of the Flint water crisis. Yes, we're tired of it too, but they're trying to push it away so they don't have to put money into us, because pay. I guess we're just not as important. So lowering the numbers, everything has been based on these lead numbers. The state's sentinel testing, which is where they did the lead and copper, they were supposed to identify the service lines to make sure it was proper, and they were supposed to conduct very strict, very proper lead and copper rule testing, because all of the resources, like bottled water, were based on those tests. And if they didn't drop, then the state could get away with pulling out resources like the bottled water, and that's what happened. And then it all just kind of came crashing. I was like, everything we fought for, every bit of truth, the testing, we've been pushing people, encouraging them to get tested. It's all a lie, and all of the things that we've lost because these tests supposedly showed that the lead levels were dropping. How many families had this done, trusted people to come into their home, and told your water's safe and fine? And who knows if it was or not? You can't know.
I could tell you. At least I could tell you from the canvassing we did. So after we found out about this one gentleman, I just kind of asked a few more people just that I know because I've been here so many times. And 2 more told me, oh yeah, they came in my home and they ran the water. So that's when we decided, you know what, we don't really have the money to do this, but we're just going to do it off our savings. This was in June. So Jen and I started canvassing pretty much all of Flint. Flint has 9 wards, and we started going ward by ward and knocking on doors, basically needle in a haystack. At first, we targeted homes that had the most lead, documented lead. You could find that online. But we were having trouble finding something called the Sentinel homes. She alluded to it. Basically, the Sentinel homes were the official focus group of homes that the state of Michigan chose. We don't know why they chose it. That's a whole different story. But it's the official focus group that was basically used by the state of Michigan to convince the EPA that Flint had fallen back below 15 parts per billion, which is the action level. So just think about it as this was the testing group. 650 homes was the original group. It has shrunk down significantly into the hundreds, into like 120, I think. But the bottom line is, these homes were supposed to be continually tested starting in 2016 all the way through present day. But we couldn't find those homes at first because the state, for probably reasons that they don't want you to know, online would only put the actual street address that these homes were, not the actual house number. So thankfully, there was a researcher who had done his own research study that actually showed they chose these homes based on a very biased process and basically chose homes that would be least likely to have lead contamination. So we spoke with this gentleman, his name's Pierre Gouvertz, and he had found out the exact addresses for Sentinel homes. So we began canvassing every single day. We probably knocked on at least 50 to 60 doors every day. It was damn hot. And before you know it, we start finding out that state officials from the Department of Environmental Quality, as well as Flint residents that were part of a program known as CORE. Flint residents on this CORE program, they were hired by the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality to go around door to door, make sure residents had water filters, make sure they were applied correctly, make sure they have other water resources. They were trained by MDEQ, the environmental agency, and residents started telling us that either Department of Environmental Quality officials entered their home saying, we're here to test your water, and let the water run, in some cases for 10 to 15 minutes before collecting the sample, or workers on this CORE program were the ones who did it. In fairness to them, they were trained by the Department of Environmental Quality. They're not environmental experts, so if they were doing it the wrong way, probably because that's what they were told to do. But we were stunned because literally we knocked on 400 doors. Majority of people obviously weren't home or didn't answer because they thought we were solicitors. But we found 31 homes that were on this Sentinel program, the official state program, which Governor Snyder cited this program's data to shut down the water pods and declare Flint's water restored. We found 31 homes that had illegal flushing in it. 17 of those homes were actually the Department of Environmental Quality or CORE going in and flushing themselves. The remaining 14 homes, the residents were the ones who flushed it because they were verbally instructed by the environmental agency and these CORE workers, run your water for several minutes before taking the sample. Basically, to boil this down into non-scientific terms, they cook the data. They literally cook the data by flushing out the evidence. Now, if they would have done it the right way, could it be possible that the lowers were level? Sure. But there's no way of knowing, because starting in 2016, this is when Obama was still president, a lot of the homes we found, this was done in their homes in 2016. So the testing has been basically, in at least these homes that we found, done the wrong way. And we know this because the EPA confirmed for us on the record that if these homes were being used for our compliance, meaning being used for EPA regulatory compliance, then water was supposed to be stagnant for 6 hours. Water was supposed to be taken as a first draw, meaning turn a tap on, take it right away. And state officials were supposed to drop off the test kits with the residents, not go into homes and test for the residents. Did I miss anything?
Also, they didn't, even some of the homes that we stopped by, we found it interesting. We were looking at maps with people who had high lead levels and found that they weren't in the Sentinel program. The houses across the street were, and they assume they have copper lines, but nobody ever came in and actually verified their service line. So that's also a giant mess, because as you had discovered, the records in Flint are bad. My home on record still says NA for service line material. There's a third of the city that's still missing. They have to dig up at the curb box and go into the home to identify the service line material. So they're not even starting off at the right homes. Again, these two homes that we had found in the one neighborhood, they said they had copper, although nobody had come in to verify it. Yet the neighbor across the street had super high lead. They didn't, yet they were chosen for the Sentinel program. And they were given gift cards as well to be in this program. So of course Flint residents are like, sure, you know, we can use some gift cards, obviously buy bottled water and whatever else. But I just found that odd, because the neighbor across the street, high lead, these two people did not, but they said nobody came in. So that's a huge no-no right there. You're using unverified service line materials.
Service lines, by the way, if you don't know, the service lines are from the curb into, like, the curb to the main valve in the yard. And those are the service lines that they're changing in Flint. They're replacing the damaged lead service lines, galvanized service lines, and making it, I think, copper or plastic or whatever. But the problem is Flint's old records of which homes had lead service lines literally were on index cards. So these homes on this official focus group, you could be saying, oh, your home has copper, or your home has galvanized or whatever, when it's lead. So in addition to this flushing, like she said, you find two homes on one side of the street that are copper. They're on the official state program. This home with insane lead levels isn't. And Bernard, the original person we spoke about, he had 11,886 parts per billion. You think you'd want to put him on the official group to see your highest case lead examples, to see if they're going down? He wasn't. We also, in canvassing around Flint, we found people that explicitly recount Department of Environmental Quality officials coming to their home, flushing their water, taking the sample, and then leaving, coming back, not even sending them a result in the mail, coming back to tell them it was fine. And then you look online, because they have listed the results by address. This particular address says never tested. Well, this is an environmental agency that has been caught in the past throwing out high lead tests, because when you throw out the high tests, your average goes down, and then you could say, oh, we're meeting EPA regulations.